Hello, I'm Susan Whitus. I am the director and curator of the Steven Myron Holl Foundation, and we're very excited to have you here watching our amazing film on our architecture archive. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Steven Myron Holl Foundation, which we call SMHF. It's a nonprofit organization founded by the architect Steven Holl in 2010 with the mission to stimulate dialogue and innovation where architecture, visual art, and ecology meet. And through exhibitions, public programs, an international architecture residency, and our architecture archive and research library that you're going to see today, we foster interdisciplinary exchange and encourage new ways of thinking about architecture and design's role in today's cultural, technological, and ecological landscape. Our Rhinebeck campus is Steven Holl's lifelong cultural project, and it continues to evolve each year as a place for creativity, research, education, and public programs. So our mission centers on three interrelated principles: the synthesis of the arts, bringing together architecture, art, scholars, musicians, poets, and the public in conversation about the future of culture, design, in our relationship to the natural world. Education is central to everything we do through a democratic public access architecture archive and library. We encourage critical thinking and support the next generation of architects, artists, and thinkers. Ecology is equally fundamental through the stewardship of our 30-acre nature reserve, the ecological design of our buildings, and environmentally engaged programming. We seek to strengthen the relationship between humanity and nature while inspiring climate responsible design and cultural stewardship. As you'll see in the film, our campus includes the archive, its gallery, the nature reserve, which has outdoor sculpture and architecture and sculpture, and space for lectures, performances, educational program, and residencies. Visitors experience the architecture not solely through exhibitions, but by walking the landscape, visiting the archive, and experience how the light, ecology, and design interact throughout the campus. And we welcome visitors throughout the world for guided tours and hope that people leave inspired by the work and the conversation that it generates. You'll see that the archive is not simply a collection. It's a laboratory, an evolving laboratory of design, revealing the unseen connections between concept and realization, all about the process of architecture. Just a little bit about our programs. Our architecture residency is one of our main programs, and we welcome emerging architects from around the world. This year's theme is resonance, how architecture resonates across disciplines, cultures, landscape, materials, and lived experience. Our architecture residents participate in intensive discussions with architects, artists, historians, poets, musicians, and other leading thinkers. And the goal is not only to teach architecture, but to cultivate curiosity, critical thinking, collaboration, and experimentation. Most of our lectures are available on our YouTube channel, so audiences everywhere can be involved in the conversations. Every summer, we have a series of conversations that you can join virtually as well. One example of our exhibitions, which always combine architecture with either art, music, poetry, or nature. Our current exhibition is titled Furniture by Architects, Sculpture by Margaret Zeliski. and it explores architecture at the scale of the object. Furniture, you can see all of this on our website, tspacerhinebeck.org. Furniture by architects are included, including Frank Lloyd Wright, Alto, Schindler, Gehry, John Nouvel, Richard Meyer, and Steven Holl, which is presented alongside sculpture by Margaret Saliski that has an architectural experimental center. The exhibition demonstrates that architectural thinking is not confined to buildings. It operates across scales, from a candlestick to a chair to an urban project. And because the exhibition is presented adjacent to the archive, visitors can also view Steven Holl's drawings and models for his furniture design, revealing the creative journey from the beginning to realization. So, why is the architecture archive relevant today? The archives have traditionally been places for specialists, and we want ours to be a public resource. We believe the creative process belongs to everyone, not solely architects, and that architecture is not about finished buildings solely. Models are not simply miniature buildings, they're tools for thinking. By opening the archive to exhibitions, tours, residencies, and research, we hope that visitors will understand how ideas evolve, how architecture shapes everyday life, and why thoughtful design matters, especially as we face ecological and cultural challenges today. One of the great pleasures of our work is welcoming visitors from around the world. So we invite you to visit the campus through guided tours of our archive, our gallery, exhibitions, and our nature reserve. And we also encourage you to engage with our lecture, our residency, and public programs on our YouTube channel. So we're continually evolving, and we hope you'll visit us in Rhinebeck and experience firsthand how architecture, ecology, and the landscape come together in this place. And closing, the archive and the foundation isn't simply preserving architecture, it's cultivating conditions for new architecture, new ideas, and new conversations to emerge. We hope to see you soon. Thank you.
We are here in the archive, and the basic idea was to make an architectural archive that, first of all, saved all the trees on the site. So it has to be narrow to thread its way through the trees. And then the idea that it could grow. So the notion of brachiating, like a tree branches brachiate. And you can see here in this concept sketch, the original 1940 bungalow building that this is an addition to. And then the first branch was built in 2018 and opened in 2019. And the second branch is now built 2 years ago. And there's the possibility of several branches that thread its way through the trees. And also what happens in the landscape, because the shift is more than 12 feet, the brachiating is happening in 3 dimensions. It's happening in plan around the trees and also up and into the landscape. The building is an example of ecological state-of-the-art. It's geothermally heated and cooled by a single well, 500 feet deep. And even though it's almost 3,000 square feet, it works perfectly. This is heated and cooled with an electric bill for the water furnace at $40 a month. And this 1940s house has an oil furnace, this little thing, and it costs $1,000 a month in the winter. That's the difference between geothermal heat and cooling and fossil fuels. Now we have a green roof, which was 2 years later installed, and we're just finishing the solar installation, which will take care of all the electrical needs in this building, which means this will be a net zero building. Also, this window is placed that you can work here So while I'm doing my management, I can see if someone is coming in, and they can't see me, but I can see their legs walking over there. And I usually recognize the shoes and I can know who it is, and I can escape out the back door if I have to. Also here, you'll have all my architecture books where I put art and architecture together. So Oliver Alto is next to Vito Acconci. Pierre Charot is next to Cézanne. There's a whole poetry philosophy section. You have Deleuze and Guattari, A Thousand Plateaus. We have all the poetry of Robert Kelly, a friend and colleague here in the Hudson Valley. There's a relationship between philosophy, poetry, art, architecture. It isn't just architecture. For me, it's always all of the arts, a synthesis of the arts. Above the books, I store all my watercolors. This process of all my buildings, 5x7 watercolors, they go all the way back to 1979. So there's something like 50,000 5x7 watercolor. Every building in this archive starts as a concept drawing like this, and then they're carried out in models. And that's what the whole archive is about, is we always worked with models. So love to keep the models as a kind of progression in time.
It's a record of over 4 decades of practice, and that's through the architectural models, it's through the drawings, through Steven's watercolors, through the library, through other works that are in the collection by other artists and architects. And it's kind of a rare type within the typology of museums or archives. There are a couple others, but they're not a public resource in the same way that this one is. We have open gallery hours, we're open for tours, we're open for research appointments. So for instance, the last research appointment I had, someone was looking at the Bellevue Arts Museum in Seattle. And so we could pull every model, we could pull all of the watercolors from the very first time, it was just an inkling of an idea, all the way through the drawings. And it's a really valuable tool for researchers who can see the entire process of the design and the realization.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Maddie. I work for Steven Holl Architects, and this project is Steven Holl in his purest form because this is him designing for himself as a client. We will go into the architectural archive today, which was finished in 2019 and is an archive of Steven Holl Architects models since 1976. And you'll see a couple other projects on the site. So T-Space, our kind of flagship T-Space gallery across the street. T2 is a studio space, and then the X-Event House is an experimental housing project. And that really is kind of a theme among all of what we'll see today, is this is meant to be like a campus of experimentation in art, architecture, poetry, ecology, education. Those are our missions as a nonprofit.
This is T-Space Gallery. It was built in 2010. In plan, it's shaped as a T. The space was created very spontaneously. It was purely an act of creative energy. It's about art and architecture. That's the whole idea. And so each of the artists work with the concept of art, working with architecture, nature, poetry, and music together to create these unique installations. This space then has, over the years, gotten incredible attention by the artist community, and that made us create an extension of the gallery in the archive space itself. The brachiating form has now an extension that can bring that program of creative new work to coexist with the knowledge of the model making and the books and the libraries.
We've always worked in models. So after concept sketches that are done in watercolors, what is the idea that's driving the design? We try to do study models. And then a lot of these are kind of finished models. Like this is 1978, the Telescope House, one of my first residential commissions, a model I made in basswood. This is the Bronx Gymnasium Bridge. When I first came to New York, we won a PA award, 1978. That's made out of paper and basswood and concrete. And then this is a sort of breakthrough when I was very young and I had an exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art, and it was 1989. And Charles and Jessie Price came to New York, and they were looking for an architect for a very important house. And they saw this exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art, and they liked my work, and they said, "We want you to do our house." So that was the Strato House. It was realized in 1991. So that's a kind of beginning point right after having that MoMA show. And this also is the beginning of building a building that was large, and that was Fukuoka. I was invited by Arata Izusaki to the void space, hinge space housing in Fukuoka. You can see all sorts of different study models, how we work. You know, this is in rubber. Look at that. And then one in concrete, wood, different combinations, and all the different parts and pieces, different scales. And that's still in really good shape. This is the Cranbrook Institute of Science, realized in 1997. And here's my breakthrough building was Kiasma, the incredible moment. We won this competition in Helsinki, and you can see this idea of the intertwining of the landscape and the intertwining of two parts of the building. It's sort of all with natural light. Every gallery has natural light. You can see the rejected schemes and all the different studies that finally led to the realization. And that building has been 25 years now as this one. This is the Chapel of St. Ignatius. Look at the amount of effort that an architect goes through, all the wrong schemes until, you know, you kind of find a way. I mean, I knew I wanted to bring light in from above, but I didn't know how. And then we started so many different study models. So when someone says, "How did you achieve this?" It's a Jesuit Catholic university, Seattle University, and I studied St. Ignatius' writings, and the light which will inspire must come from above. So there was something in the beginning of the project that brought me to this point of light coming from above that organizes all the spaces. But exactly how that would happen took, I don't know, 4 or 5 months of different models and different designs. Obviously, at this point, I wasn't clear. I mean, I mean, look at this terrible design. I mean, you know, or this, you know, I mean, I think you have, the idea has to drive the design. It has to be clear. It has to be worked out, and it takes time. I knew I wanted the light to come from above. 7 bottles of light in a stone box. So it wasn't easy. This is the Nelson Atkins Museum original model from the competition. The competition was 1999, and it opened in 2007. And the charge was to build on the north side, right there, on that parking lot, and connect to the original building. And we said, that's not an ideal. You would block that whole north elevation. In the introduction, they brought all the architects here, and we got to go around, and I thought the collection is the way into thinking about whatever this project is. And then I found an 11th century Chinese black and white huge painting that knitted architecture into the landscape. You know, they were like fused. And I thought that's what we should do. We just should fuse into the landscape this addition. And that was one of the images I used in the presentation, was this painting from the 11th century. So architecture doesn't necessarily come from architecture. In this case, it comes from inspirations of painting and the collection and other things that are not really obvious. And you see different studies of the light coming in, the fluttering T's, and all the different studies of the lenses. So if anybody's really interested in how that got developed, they can see all the different iterations. So here you get a feeling of the space, how the whole building ascends and goes up to negotiate the shift in the landscape. This is a simple span of 18 feet. So when I did this 18 feet here, I calculated just a 2-inch concrete. And the builder, he poured 4.5 inches of concrete on my little 2x12s at 12 inches on center. I did the calculation, it's not gonna hold. So we had to go back after he poured the concrete and do flitch plates, which is a two 2x12s with a 1/4-inch steel plate bolted together, and they form strong beams, right? And we had to thread them through from the outside wall this way. So there's 3 of them in here. Now, this is so solid, you can't feel any bounce or anything. You could drive 3 Hummers and park them here on this floor. Anyway, in case you ever want to park a car here, you can, you could use it as a parking garage. So this was an invitation to do 8 skyscrapers, and we proposed a cinematheque that floats in a water garden, and we connected all the exoskeletal concrete towers with bridges, and some have different functions in them. One has a swimming pool. And this project caused me to have to open an office in Beijing. I care about the details, the details and the material and the way things come together. To me, that's architecture. I can't, not do that. And this project was on the cover of Architecture Record, on the cover of Domus, and very many widespread publicity for the company. So because of linked hybrid, we were invited to do the sliced porosity block in Chengdu. Here, this is the biggest project we ever did in our lives. Sliced porosity block in Chengdu. The original client wanted to build a shopping center, huge, and 2 towers, condominium and offices. And we said no. What I'd like to do is a gigantic public space, put the shopping center below, and have skylights and ponds that bring natural light to the shopping center, put the offices, the hotel, and the condominiums in a block. And then we had to organize this where the sun slices it so we get sunlight to the existing houses here. So it became sliced porosity block, over 3 million square feet. So this is also an amazing project. The Vanke company, it was a competition for their headquarters, a hotel, offices, and a big landscape. We called it the horizontal skyscraper. And it's right by the sea. So I just took the whole building up to the height limit and floated over a public landscape. The whole landscape is a sculptural condition, and it has huge spans. And the engineer there, Dr. Shao, said, Steven, you don't have to have trusses. I'm going to do this cable stay. Cable stay, that's bridge construction. So this is the largest cable stay work of architecture that's ever been built. That's very inventive technology to get those spans. And that opened in 2007. By the way, the first project in China is the Nanjing Museum. And this was an invitation, a straight invitation by Izusaki to do a head building, which is based on Chinese perspective. And that garden that doesn't have vanishing points. And then it raises up and looks back at the city of Nanjing. But this went through a number of iterations. Hey, look at this. I started to doubt this, and I said, okay, let's try an organic form. Can you imagine? Ugly little building, Thank God I backed out of that. I mean, you got to watch out. Maybe I was looking at too many magazines or something at that time. Boy, I'm glad I didn't do that. So here's the kind of story about architecture. So here's a project that we were invited to do in 2006 in Kaplankaya, Turkey. And we had the design of the 3 sections of housing. There was the villas that were on the ground, the townhouses that were in the ground, and then over the ground, the precinct that has this chapel. 2008 was the end of economy for developers doing any kind of projects. It went into the drawer. About 3 years ago, someone purchased the rights to build our project on that site, and then want to build the whole thing ideal as it was originally designed, with the solar panels as close to net zero as possible, with the landscape and the chapel and the public space. These are just different studies of the part called the precinct. And yeah, and that's different studies of the chapel. So the brachiating form, works within 18 feet. Why? Because 18 feet is a good proportion, but also I can span it with a single member, a 2x12. When I made the original building, I made a window here, and I said, what we'll do when we expand, we'll just pop this window out and cut down and make the opening. And there you see the window. That window was here. It has the same system of geothermal, but I didn't have the money to put in another well, and we didn't think that this well would be enough. But as it turns out, in the wintertime, the heat rises. So we're at the highest point in the archive now, and that keeps this place plenty warm. So we didn't have to hook another geothermal. If we do in the future, we'll go out in this direction, around 60 feet or something out in this direction, and there's the link to hook the new geothermal well would be hooked here. Now this particular extension, I said, I'm not going to do what we did. We have the same outside, the same aluminum, the same width, but the inside is white, and that allows it to be a gallery with maximum natural light. The archive building, by the way, when it was designed, was not for maximum light at all. Only amount of light you need by those 7 skylights, which were donated by Lux. But then we have a kind of elevator. You get a feeling, it's kind of a look back. You get a feeling of the whole space. And one of the things that I like is also, our mission is to always have an architecture show. So what is architecture? And that's also a question we like to hover. And so this became the architecture show.
Exactly. How many spaces in the world exist where this dialogue is a living, breathing question that every show is a response to?
Right.
That's something that I think those of us that have followed this space closely have enjoyed. Yeah. And every season brings new answers to these questions.
Architecture has a way of uplifting your spirits just by itself. So I think that's what's important. In a way, this archive is not as important. It's only important if you want to look deeper into the whole philosophical roots. And it's like music. If you want to understand the Stravinsky's, the source of the music, you find out that one composition was based on the domes of St. Mark's Cathedral in Venice. Now, you can listen to that piece of music and not know a thing about that, right? But if you're interested, you could find that out. Listening to the piece of music is experiencing the buildings. If you're interested, you can come here and look at the models and see connections between buildings and between these ideas. Although I do believe that an idea, an architectural idea, doesn't have to be built to have meaning.